As most of you probably already know by now, Nintendo just recently dropped the news that Breath of the Wild will be receiving a prequel in the form of a Hyrule Warriors game. This is on top of the already announced sequel, meaning we are getting a full trilogy for Breath of the Wild, and one of the things I am most excited for in this prequel is getting to play out battles, scenes, locations, and events in general that are mentioned in Breath of the Wild, but don't actually get to see in the game. The defense of Fort Hitano, the horror show at Castletown, the champions in battle, and so much more. So today, I thought it would be fun to take a look at some of these unseen events mentioned within Breath of the Wild that we might get to see within the Age of Calamity. And I am not riding this hype train alone, as today, joining me is the amazing Monster Maze. Be sure to go grab yourself a snack.
Stop right there, man. I got this.
Oh, okay. Take it away, man.
Be sure to grab yourself a snack or drink, folks, and send them in to get featured right here. And without further ado, let's get into 5 unseen parts of Breath of the Wild which might be playable in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Starting off where Breath of the Wild starts off, the Great Plateau. Link begins his quest here following a 100-year slumber due to the events that took place a century ago during the Great Calamity. He awakens to a rather scenic plateau that looks out onto central Hyrule. But after a little bit of exploration, we come to realize that this plateau has a very rich but messy history. During the attack of Calamity Ganon 100 years ago, the malice-fueled guardians and enraged monsters under the allegiance of Ganon wreaked havoc and destruction across Hyrule, testing through towns and settlements like a hot knife through butter. And while sites like Akkala Citadel, Fort Hitano, and Hyrule Castle get the most attention, the Great Plateau actually suffered a lot of damage. A century ago, there was actually an entrance to the plateau via a staircase which is now plugged with rubble. It is very likely that a lot of guardians found their way up through this grand entrance and began to destroy the religious landmark that is the Great Plateau. We only find the remains of guardian stalkers up here, meaning it was likely from the initial rush of the guardians that reached the plateau, and by the looks of things, a great and unknown battle took place here. While there isn't much remains of life to be found, we can find hints to this battle between the Hylians and the guardians, as we find bows, bundles of arrows, crates with food inside them, and even man-made structures. Obviously, the Guardians ran riot in this battle and tanked however many Hylians were actually on the Great Plateau at the time, as we can see the damage done to the Temple of Time, the bridge, settlements, and other ruins. In this prequel, there's a fairly good chance we actually get to play out these events. Perhaps not as Link himself, as canonically he was never here during the Great Calamity, but the nature of these warrior games allows us to take control of multiple characters across multiple events in the story. Maybe we'll see a small level as a Hylian knight, for instance. I think getting to see the battle for the Temple of Time, along with its devastation, destruction, and decline, and also the Great Plateau as a whole, would be a very entertaining and interesting level to play out.
In the trailer for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, we see a lot of intense battles taking place, from the early stages of the Great Calamity within Hyrule Field to the turning points such as the battle at the Akkala Citadel, the invasion of Zora's domain, and even the horror show at Castletown. But something not seen in the trailer that could very well appear in the game is the defense of Fort Hitano. Although the events of Breath of the Wild take place 100 years after the Great Calamity, and not much of 100 years ago is known, we do learn some events through the Creating a Champion book, such as the defense of Fort Hitano. Towards the peak of the Calamity, when Guardians had spread like an infection over Hyrule, and the kingdom was on razor's edge, clusters of Guardians had began spreading to the outer regions of Hyrule, such as Necluda, which happens to be where Link also ended up, in an attempt to retreat to Hitano Village to seek refuge. And within the Necluda region, we can find Fort Hitano, a strong Hylian army line between the fields of Blacktree Plain and Hitano Village. Whilst not looking like much compared to the likes of the Akkala Citadel, this fortress of defense held off a multitude of guardians. We can even see the mass amount of guardians left in front of the fort and across the entire field. This alone just shows the amount of malice-fueled tanks the fort had to hold off, and due to how important an event this was, but somehow never shown off even in the form of a memory in Breath of the Wild, this surely has to be a level, part of a level, or a cutscene in Age of Calamity. There are so many routes to take the defense of Fort Hitano in a level. We could play as a Hyrulean knight in the front line of defense on the fort itself. We could be a field soldier braving the war zone of a field, or maybe even play as Link himself towards his defeat, which took place just beside Fort Hitano. However it's done, we think it's almost certain that the defense of Fort Hitano will be in the game, as it's one of the most important and significant events of the Calamity that we never, ever actually got to see. This event is incredibly underappreciated. It's just so hard to imagine how many guardians and monsters this small line of defense had to hold off. It was one hell of a battle, and these soldiers who fought off all those guardians should be honoured. Now, whilst this time frame of the Calamity is full of various battles and attacks that we never saw, there is also certain people we never saw from this time frame, and to keep this video from being a list of just battles, I thought it would be interesting to bring up Link's family, or to be more specific, their death. Now I know, that sounds a bit, well, morbid, dark, horrible, and generally upsetting, but Link's family, specifically his father, is someone we have never seen in the series, and we know he had a father 100 years ago, as Princess Zelda mentions him in the Shelter from the Storm memory. I'm not quite sure how Age of Calamity could tie his family in, but given his father was audibly mentioned to be a Hyrulean knight, there is always the chance we could get to see him and maybe even see a conversation between himself and Link. A personal idea of mine would be that early in the game, before all hell breaks loose, we see Link and his father talking, say at the Knight Barracks, similar to the first Hyrule Warriors introduction, where we see Link training in the castle training grounds. It's pushing it, but if we got to play as Link's father in his role as a knight, that would also be incredibly cool. I can just imagine a heartbreaking scene as we see a guardian laser blasting towards the pair, and it just takes Link's father's life right in front of him. That would be heartbreaking.
The Great Calamity is by far the most devastating attack the Kingdom of Hyrule has ever seen. A cataclysmic fit of destruction tearing down a beautiful kingdom, and in the modern day of Breath of the Wild, all we see is the desolating aftermath of this attack. However, in the Age of Calamity prequel, we might actually get to see where it all began: Hyrule Castle and Castle Town. The beginning of the trailer even shows us a more high-resolution take on this horror show at Castletown, and considering this is where the attack breaks out, it's rather likely that we get to actually play a level here, at the beginning of the Calamity. Now, it wouldn't be as Link or any of the 4 champions, as we know from Return of Calamity Ganon that Link, Mipha, Daruk, Revali, Urbosa, and Princess Zelda were all absent from Central Hyrule at the time. We can even see just how far away from the initial attack they were during the memory, meaning if we do get to see Hyrule Castletown at the moment Calamity Ganon broke free, it would be as another character we are not aware of yet. Or hey, maybe we'll just get to see it as a cutscene between levels. It's such a significant and important event of the Great Calamity that it almost has to be shown, and boy, we cannot wait. Now, before we get into our final pick of the video, we have a couple of honorable mentions that, while not making the main list for full segments, do deserve to be mentioned. Firstly, one of the grandest stages for combat, the Colosseum. We can find this empty landmark in central Hyrule, just outside the Great Plateau, but in the modern day are only greeted to a Lionel, and not a friendly one. Another event we know of pre-Calamity is what went down at Akkala Citadel. This colossal, impenetrable fortress of defense was used to keep watch over the northeastern coast of Hyrule, looking out at sea and ensuring no invaders from afar would be able to reach central Hyrule without passing them first. We can see in the trailer for Age of Calamity that whatever went down here during the Calamity will be in the game to some degree, likely with us playing as Daruk as seen in this clip from the trailer. Whatever happened here, we will definitely be getting to see just how exactly Great Akkala Citadel fell to the hands of the Great Calamity.
One of the most important parts of the Great Calamity was the champions of Hyrule and their efforts in combating the attack. Although ultimately unsuccessful, they did play a very significant role in both the battlefield, their divine beasts, and further taking on their corrupt divine beasts. They held off for so long, which was very, very crucial, but wasn't enough. We get to see each of the 4 champions throughout the trailer battling in different scenarios: Daruk at the Battle of the Akkala Citadel, Urbosa in Gerudo Town, Mipha tanking a Guardian, and Revali assisting Link. And whilst this does confirm we will play as the champions and see them in action, towards the end of the trailer we get a small glimpse at something even more interesting. At the end of the trailer, we see a cut of each champion fighting their Blight Ganons. We can't see the Blights themselves, but looking a little closer at these half-second clips, we can see the green electricity lines within Van Boris, the Divine Beast wall texture of Varuta, the same for Daruk along with the blazes from Fireblight Ganon, and Revali flying in the air above Vamedo with a laser beam shooting towards him. This is a brief but strong indication that we will get to see and possibly play out the battles between the champions and their Blight Ganons, which in the story we are told in Breath of the Wild ends in their defeat. But depending on how Age of Calamity goes in terms of the canon, we might see them triumph. But it's very unlikely, as the game does seem to be canon. Regardless, seeing the original 4 champions of Hyrule in action will be so cool. We are told stories throughout all of Breath of the Wild about how strong, wise, and noble they all were, and with this prequel coming in a matter of months, we will finally see how they all were in the flesh. Link X Mipha, anyone? Thanks a ton for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to drop a like and subscribe for more Zelda content. What do you think of our picks? Will we get to see the full story behind these events, or are we off the mark here? Be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts and some events you'd like to see take place in the Age of Calamity. Big thanks to Monster Maze for joining me on this one. We did another video over on his channel covering the path of Urbosa during the Great Calamity, and a little series he is doing following the main characters of Breath of the Wild during the Calamity. So be sure to go and check that out. His videos are very well made and most importantly, very entertaining. Another huge thank you goes out to all of my amazing channel supporters for your incredibly generous support to the channel. Your support does not go unnoticed or underappreciated. I appreciate it so much. If you'd like to join them and get your name at the end of all of my videos and some more perks, then considering supporting the channel on either Patreon or channel memberships right here on YouTube. Again, thanks for watching, and until the next time, I've been Hyrule Gamer.